when I was introduced to this, the difference between the aware mind and the thinking mind, when I was struggling with insomnia, the guy who was also, funnily enough, called Guy, he encouraged me to use a diffusion technique. So if I had a thought, let's say I was going to do a talk and the thought pops up, I'm going to mess this up, or I'm in bed and the thought pops up, I'm not going to sleep. First, you
Mm.
notice the thought, and then you add the prefix, I'm aware of the thought, I'm going to mess this up. I'm aware of the thought, I'm not going to sleep. And that gives you this little bit of space between you and the thought. And then you're no longer identified or trapped in the thought, one with the thought.
All right. Well, hello, Simon Mundie.
Drew, lovely to see you. How are you?
I'm fabulous. It's great to see you.
Yeah, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, for you that peeps out there in podcast land watching, so Simon and I connected. It's been about a month ago. You connected us for the PR. We're discussing PR for your new book, Champion Mindset, and
Champion thinking.
Champion Thinking. I apologize.
That's all
Champion
right.
Thinking. It's so funny because every time when I was working on your proposal and I always think of you as kind of a mindset guy.
Funny, I don't think of myself in that way. And actually I don't even think mindset's a thing.
Really, say more about that.
Well, in my book, um, really the crux of it is around exploring what's there before the mind. And what do we mean by the mind? Well, we really just mean thoughts and beliefs and stuff like that. And they only come online, I don't know, when you're 2 or something like that. We've got
Mm,
a baby 9-month-old downstairs. She doesn't think in thoughts. She hasn't got the language center up and running, but there is an awareness, a consciousness there. So the
mm,
consciousness is always there before the mind, as I've just described it, in terms of thoughts and beliefs and stuff like that. And in the book, I talk about Carol Dweck's work of growth mindset, fixed mindset, which is really taken off in education, sport, and business. And I question it
mm.
because it's one of those things that's just got a lot of momentum on its own. But actually, I spoke to a very interesting researcher from the University of Edinburgh who tried to recreate the initial research and was unable to find the same things that she did. And so, this idea, some of the ideas around growth mindset, for example, around praising process over outcome, and it has these specific results, um, don't hold water. And so, even when you say mindset, well, let me ask you, what do you think mindset means?
So for me, what I think of when I think about mindset is your perception, like the how your mind actually is perceiving and the way that you actually look and perceive the world. That for me is mindset. So I
Okay.
love that you're looking beyond the mind. I hadn't because I love that we're delving into this because it's language gives everything, right, to arise. And I haven't really even questioned that.
So,
Yeah.
I would just, something that you just said there of like the way we perceive the world or the way that we interpret the world, perhaps is a better way, because the way we perceive the world is through our senses, what we
Mhm.
see, what we hear, what we taste, what we smell, what we touch.
Yes.
And then the mindset would be what we think about the world.
Mm.
What are our views of the world? Well, I would suggest that our views of the world, whilst they tend to lean in one direction or other, they're also changing
Yes.
all the time. So if I wake up in a good mood, the world can seem like a wonderful place. If I wake up in a bad mood, it's completely different. And so this is my point about mindset, is that really mindset is just thought. And
Hmm.
thoughts are changing depending on our state. So to suggest that someone has a fixed or definitively growth mindset is, I would say, just not true, because thoughts are coming and going all the time. They're changing all the time. Now, we may have a propensity to be more, say, optimistic than pessimistic or anything like that. But fundamentally, I think mindset, and then particularly growth and fixed mindset stuff, is massively overstated. And so
Mm.
that's why I'm not a big mindset guy at all. I'm more interested in what's there before the mind, full stop.
Before the mind, yes. So my fascination is really, and I love this, conversations, right? And how would you define a conversation?
Oh gosh. How would I define a conversation? I would define a conversation as a hopefully a connection between individuals
Hmm.
and a connection via language, although not only language. There needs to be more than that. Uh, yeah, I mean that's basically it. Two people connecting through speaking. I think I'm going to keep it basic.
Well, I was interested in your perspective because if you are thinking like that point before thought, the question is when does a conversation really start, and what's the definition of a conversation? And I'm fascinated by this because being in the world of PR, right? We really believe that conversations shape everything, but I think that the way that we hold and look at conversations actually shifts the way that and how impactful they can be in the world.
Yeah, yeah, I'd
Yeah,
agree with that. Yeah,
yeah. So if yours is champion thinking,
yeah.
thinking.
Well, the reason or rather we use that title,
Yes.
as a PR working with big publishers, they have a certain say over the title, and they
Yeah.
were quite keen on that from the get go. But really, all that means in the context of my book is we're hearing the thoughts of champions.
Mm,
Champions, but the subtitle for me is more interesting, and that's how to find success without losing yourself. And that's about really understanding that success does not guarantee happiness, fulfillment, or any of those things that I think countries like the United States and Britain tend to buy into that narrative that
mm,
success is synonymous with happiness.
yes.
And I question that, as opposed to getting in touch again with this place prior to thoughts, feelings, sensations, perceptions, etc., where there is an innate enoughness, I say, an innate well-being, and that's where the sense I think of fulfillment, of joy, of peace actually is, as opposed to out there at the end of success. And so then it becomes about flipping it round and getting in touch with that, and then expressing that through what you do and the way you relate and the way you conversate, um, but not expecting those things to give you the fulfillment and happiness that perhaps most people tend to believe they do, because they don't. And then you're coming from a very different intention, one of I'm coming from a place of wholeness rather than seeking to fill a hole,
Yes.
if that makes sense.
Yes. So how do you get there?
Huh. well well, a couple of things in the book. I talk a lot about flow. So
Yeah.
in sport, obviously, otherwise sometimes known as being in the zone, um, and a lot of people talk about that. And so what I would suggest again with sport is sport as a metaphor for life. And sport, people will tend to talk about it in terms of trophies and winning and success. So if I get the Olympic gold medal, the World Cup, the Super Bowl, whatever, then I'm going to be successful. And ergo sum, I'm going to be content and happy and fulfilled. But we know so many people who've got to that level and it hasn't worked out that way. So that means that success in the sporting sense of trophies is not synonymous with the things I've discussed. But flow, where you perform and feel at your best. And we're all familiar with flow. It's that sense of, when an hour goes by in 5 minutes, or you lose yourself in an activity. Flow is a really good example of this, because there are two characteristics that I find very interesting about flow. One is a distortion of time, and two is a loss of your sense of self. And
Mm,
that sense of self is your identity, is that sense of me, the doer of our actions, the I'm a dad, I'm a left wing, right wing, I believe this, I believe that, I'm a kind person, these are my values. All of that stuff that make up what I call the story of me,
mm,
that exists through psychological time, through what's happened to us in the past, what we hope to happen to us in the future. our conditioning, all that kind of stuff. Well, in the moment of flow, that drops away. And that drops away because we're so narrowed down into this, just the now. And if you're only in the now without reference to the past or future, then identity cannot stand. So it drops away. And what's left? Well, what's left is this awareness, this consciousness that is there prior to thoughts, feelings, etc. And that shines. And
Mm.
we love it when that happens. And the portals into that presence is different for everybody. So it might be for me playing sport, it might be for my wife doing music, it might be for someone else doing cooking, it might be for someone else doing ironing. And then that's actually a true story from someone I interviewed last week. And so flow is one way to experience this. But then the question is, but how do we get more flow in everyday life? And I would suggest actually, you don't necessarily need to play sport or music to experience what this points to, but rather to understand and recognize that the voice in our head, our thoughts, our feelings, we are aware of them. And if we are aware of them, then we cannot be them fundamentally.
Yes.
And so it's a recognition that if I'm aware of my thoughts, I cannot be my thoughts. If I'm aware of my feelings, I cannot be my feelings. Just as like I'm aware of that tree, I cannot be that tree. And so, okay, well, what is it that's aware then?
Yeah.
And I would suggest that that is consciousness and that is awareness. And if we can go from thoughts, the thinking mind, to the aware mind that knows thoughts, and then become aware of the aware mind, so being aware of being aware, and we can do that anytime, but it takes a little bit of, because it's very subtle, it takes a
Mm.
little bit of finessing. When you do that, then actually I would suggest flow and its inherent characteristics of joy, subtle joy, peace, acceptance are actually there all the time. We just tend to overlook them because we get lost in experience, which is made of thoughts, feelings, sensations, perceptions. That's it. So it's
Yeah.
what's there first, but it's just noticing it. It's subtle, very subtle.
So when did you come to this awareness? Like, what was? Do you remember the moment when you were like, yeah,
Yeah. It wasn't like one moment, but fundamentally it started with suffering. You know, I
Mhm.
was looking for answers to why I felt like I felt insecure, why I felt uh, some feelings I didn't want to feel, feeling like I needed fixing, feeling like I wasn't enough, all those things that I think a lot of people feel, if not most people, if not everybody, to varying degrees. And suffering enough that I wanted to get some answers, and really starting out on the so-called self-development route, self-improvement, that kind of thing, you know, Tony
Mm.
Robbins-esque stuff.
Huh?
And then, you know, not really finding the answers I wanted there, and then going deeper and deeper, and one thing leads to another, and then various serendipitous encounters and occurrences happen in your life. And then in around 2013, I would say I was drawn or introduced to that. Let's call it the spiritual way of looking at things, although that's a loaded word. But
Yeah.
I know this is a United States podcast, so that's fine. It goes down better than it does in the UK. Um, and then yeah, so various experiences thereafter. Obviously, became interested in various teachers who speak about this thing, or speakers who talk about this thing. And actually, no, and so my understanding has deepened since then. And but in fact, actually reflecting there was actually one key point.
Yeah.
I I had insomnia in my 20s, anxiety induced insomnia, and I was looking for answers, and I was trying to fix it, and I was really stuck. And I was fortunate enough to have a session with a guy who was an instructor around acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT. And acceptance and commitment therapy is created by a guy called Professor Steve Hayes, cool American dude. And he talks about, I've interviewed him on my podcast, and he talks about it in terms of self as context. But someone else spoke to me about it, and said the following sentence to me, which completely transformed things. He spoke about the difference between the thinking mind and the aware mind. And I was
Mm.
like, whoa. I was familiar with the thinking mind, the voice in my head that's always judging and labeling and conceptualizing and giving us an identity, which we tend to think of as us, i.e. the mind, basically, the, you know, this stream of thinking and feelings. And then there's this, as he said, there's the aware mind. There's something that is there that's aware of thoughts. Thoughts come up, thoughts go, thoughts come up, thoughts go, and we're aware of them. And it was introducing me to that first of all helped me really unwind my insomnia, because previously I'd been trapped in the mind, trapped trying to get rid of thoughts with other thoughts. And there's a Zen saying, you can't get rid of blood with more blood. And it's very true. The
Yeah.
only way to escape the mind is to realize that you're aware of it and you are not the mind, and then let go. So you stop identifying with it or resisting it, and it unwinds on its own. And that was my experience. And then that understanding just deepened very much so over well, it's been over 10 years now. So
Hmm. Yeah, I think there is those moments in life where, you have that awareness and then it deepens. And I'm hoping that, people that are listening are going to have that awareness, this moment that deepens, deepens, deepens. Yes. So how does that play out in your day-to-day life for you?
um well, first of all, I would say that I am aware of the fact that I'm aware increasingly. And
Hmm.
it's almost like this recognition that I can come to at any moment. And whenever I do, there's those qualities I spoke about of peace, of acceptance. Just it's a noticing. It's not a doing. It's a noticing. Then I would say, in terms of, for example, those patterns that I had before of anxiety or insecurity or feeling like I need fixing, is that, or shame. Shame was a big one for me. Was when they come up, rather than resisting them or trying to get rid of them, now I welcome them, because there's this, as I because fundamentally I recognize that who I am is this aware presence.
Hmm.
Any feeling like that comes up, I don't have to fight it. In fact, it's an opportunity to allow it to come up, to not identify with it, not to resist it, and to, as a result, allow these patterns that have been laid down early in life, who knows, perhaps even through ancestors, who knows, allow these things to come up and gently unwind by recognizing that fundamentally it's not who I am. And so it gives me a real power to be with difficult feelings, emotions, patterns, and that kind of thing, rather than, and it's definitively given me a sense of, no, there's nothing to fix. I am enough, all those things. So that's been solved. But then it's deeper than that as well, because I would say also it gives me a recognition that, on that level, on the awareness level, on the being level, we are all one and the same. And we are all, so that means I'm not better or worse than anyone else. In fact, I'm the same as everyone else on that level. And
Yes.
so, whereas on the human level, obviously, there will be things I'm better at than you, and things you're better at than me, right? And same goes for everyone in the world. So we're unique on that level, on the human level, and we're the same on the being level. And so from that to me has been the most valuable part, is that recognition, because then that old saying of treat your neighbor like yourself, it's not something you have to try and do. Um, it's a natural way that this understanding expresses itself in life, because you recognize that actually at the deepest level they are you. So of course you're going to be treat
Yeah.
like your neighbor like yourself. And also, you're not going to put people on pedestals as, oh, this person's special, they're a celebrity, or they've got high status, and this person isn't, oh, they do a job that isn't perceived of to be important, or they're having a rough time. No, on this level everyone is the same, and not just everyone, everything.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that's a few ways it's enriched my life.
Do you have any uh, structures that you have in place to support that? I'm always curious about like structures that people have in like in the physical world that kind of is a reminder to have that bring that moment of awareness.
um so became when I was introduced to this, the difference between the aware mind and the thinking mind, when I was struggling with insomnia, the guy who was also, funnily enough, called Guy, he encouraged me to use a diffusion technique. So if I had a thought, let's say I was going to do a talk and the thought pops up, I'm going to mess this up, or I'm in bed and a thought pops up, I'm not going to sleep. First, you
Mm,
notice the thought, and then you add the prefix, I'm aware of the thought, I'm going to mess this up. I'm aware of the thought, I'm not going to sleep. And that gives you this little bit of space between you and the thought. And then you're no longer identified or trapped in the thought, one with the thought. And so, and a truth is not fact. But you're also not resisting it. So it can kind of pass by like clouds in the sky. So that in the early days was, and I still advocate that, and I still
mm,
encourage people to use that. I'm aware of the thought that, or I'm aware of the feeling, or even I'm aware of the tree, whatever it may be. Just every element of your experience, noticing you're aware of it. Now, I don't do this in a kind of such a overt way, in such a using a thought to do that anymore. I don't say that to myself. I just will sometimes just notice, oh, I'm in thought, or I'm trapped in thought, or not trapped in thought. My mind's run away with itself, and I'm there. And the same with what I can see, hear, taste, smell, feel. Noticing that there's something there first that makes all these things knowable, that
mm,
is aware of all these things. And it's, as I said, it's very subtle. I really like doing it when I walk. So when I walk, and
mm.
you've got the expanse of sky over you, and if I'm walking through London, I've got Houses of Parliament, Big Ben, whatever, and it's in those moments I probably do this most consciously for extended periods, because as I walk, anytime thoughts come up, I'll just let them go. Anytime feelings come up, I'll let them go. Not only let them go, actually, be aware that there's something there
Mm.
that is already aware of it. And it never goes and it never changes. And it's the one ever present, unchanging, reliable aspect of experience. But yet you can't point at it and say, there it is. But it's also
Yeah.
undeniable. So that to me that's what I do, is just drop into it throughout the day. Sometimes I meditate, although to be honest, that's more for focus and those kind of things, just to keep me grounded. I would say just being aware of being aware on occasion throughout the day, and particularly when I walk, is how I do it. My wife's much more structured. She's a big meditator and
Yeah.
has some pretty funky experiences.
Yeah, really meditating.
Oh yeah. She's
Yeah.
gifted at that kind of thing. Yeah.
Ah, huh. And you recently have had a baby?
Yeah, 9 months ago. We've got two kids. So the older one's 9 years and 9 months. So yeah, it's lovely. Yeah, nice little family. I'm the only man in the house apart from the cat.
And how I'm just curious, have you noticed because children being around children I think are just incredible
Mm.
because you can see it, like you can feel it being like what you're pointing to, you can feel it, you can when you're around them. Have you noticed that like becoming a father and being around kids that is actually sharpen that ability to be aware?
Um, I'm not sure. I'll reflect on that and I'll come back to you, Drew. But what I would say is that I absolutely see this presence in my baby daughter,
Mm,
and this, it's not a question for her, is she enough or not?
yes.
Does she need to achieve success to justify her existence, as it
Yeah.
is for so many people? It's not a
Yeah.
question, because the mind that judges and compares and criticizes and all those things isn't yet there. And so what I'm talking about here, this recognition, it's not some big mystical thing. It's there in any baby. And I think that's the beautiful thing, is it's very obvious when they're really little that this recognition I'm talking about is there. It then, just as they get older, as we all get older, it gets overlaid with thoughts and feelings and beliefs and all this stuff, but we never actually lose it. Then this is
Yeah.
true of every single person on the planet. And so if you go searching for it outside of yourself, you'll never find it. Like, we're all enough. We don't need fixing. This is always there. We just perhaps get lost in our experience, particularly our inner experience, and then go on a hunt for it. But it was never lost ever. Never. Can't be. Because it's who we are.
So where do you think the mind comes from?
Well, I think it's a language machine. I think, for us to be able to communicate with each other, we need to be able to conceptualize, and that's what language is. If I say this, that's a bottle, right?
Yeah.
Now, obviously in different countries they'll have different words for it, but it's just a sound that we've agreed that points to something that we then understand what we're pointing to. So it gives us the power of communication, which has enabled human beings to take over the planet. That ability to seriously,
Unfortunately. Unfortunately.
well, who knows how it will pan out, right? But yeah, for now, it's not
Yeah.
looking great.
Yeah.
But so it gives us this ability to have a shared understanding of things,
Hmm.
but the problem I think is that then we start to believe that the label is the thing. And
Yeah.
so here's a really classic example: is the idea of nationality, right? So you're an American and I'm a Brit. And a lot of people will take that very seriously, right?
Yes. Yes.
Well, let me tell you, America is a concept, and so is Britain. It's as real as the equator, right? Now you try and go and find the equator and pick it up and bring it to me. Good luck with that. But I think
Yeah.
that we don't, as a species, yet realize that the labeling machine that is the mind, the conceptualizing machine that is the mind, that comes up in the voice in our head, is not who we are, and is also not representative of reality. It's a tool that helps us to cooperate with each other, but we're still lost in it. So I think from an evolutionary point of view, we haven't transcended the mind yet, but it's got to happen at some point. Not in our lifetime, Drew, but at some.
Yeah, not mine for sure because I'm old. Well, this is gets to the heart of something I'm so fascinated by. That makes us so easily manipulated.
Yeah.
And a guy named Edward Bernays, nephew of Sigmund Freud, figured
Yes,
that out.
I've watched the documentary on him. Fascinating.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The rise of the self,
In
and
fact,
it's
that's your documentary. You sent it to me. I watched that. It was brilliant. Yeah.
yeah, it's I find it so fascinating because I think that this is what you're, and when we talked and discussed that some of the most important work on the planet, what you're doing, and the reason is because if we don't actually get a handle and become aware of this, right, that then our hope for our species, I think, doesn't look all that swimming. Because it is, we've now created this by the images that we believe are true and what we needed. We've created this world with oceans full of plastic and all, not a great world. And that's what I love about being in PR is because I know how important it is to shift those conversations, but keep reminding people you get to choose, and this is just an image
Hmm. Hmm.
that people will buy, but we're sold that image. We're sold like what we were talking about, what success is. We've been sold a false bill of goods of what
Yeah.
success is, but we believe it. If you interview people, what is success? It's all different versions, but all similar. It's the white picket fence, it's the money in the bank, it's the kids, and all of that. And so it makes it really challenging for us as human beings. I lost you.
I'll be right back. Hang on.
Okay, no worries.
Okay. Oh no, God. Do you know what that happens sometimes? It's really weird. I need to get a new computer. I'm back. It does it on its own. Sorry about that.
Yeah, the powers that be did not want us to be having this conversation. They're
Yeah,
gonna
you're
shut
right.
this down.
Yeah, you're probably right. Malign forces at work.
Yeah, we've got to be careful.
Yeah, yeah. But
Yeah,
I think you're right.
yeah,
And to me, sorry, just quick. I'll just say one very quick thing, Drew, which is that I think the biggest problem, as far as I see it, or one of the biggest problems, is the propensity we have to other
yeah,
people, animals, and the planet,
yeah,
because we all feel so separate, because we are so identified just with that human side, which it's obvious that I'm separate from you, right? But whereas the being side that I talk about, where it's the same in me and you as anyone, and also animals and stuff like that. On that level, then the connectedness, and then me and another stops making sense. And so when it comes to, for example, wars between tribes or countries, or me trying to get some success by clambering over you using ruthless tactics, anything like that, stops making sense. And I think that kind of othering of people, me and my tribe,
Yeah.
and rather than recognizing, again, that's just an idea. How I decide my tribe is different to yours. As I said with the America and British example,
Yeah.
it's literally an idea. And if
Yeah.
it's an idea, we don't have to hold it. We can let it go.
Yes. But you and your platform out there expressing this, it is in that moment when you're clear, you are the one doing the observing, and you get freedom of choice, and it's not true, and you can put that separation in. That is our hope for to stop othering, to get to a place of enough and satisfaction. I mean, people are just suffering
Mm,
on the
yeah.
planet, and it's needless suffering. They really have everything that they need.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, there's no doubt we could, as a species, feed everyone and keep the planet going and live in peace if we wanted to, en masse. There'd have to be a critical mass. But right now, we're unable to. And I don't think that's necessarily down to malign people, but I think it's down to the fact that we don't yet en masse realize what I've been talking about in terms of we're not the mind, we're not this
Yeah.
voice in our head, we're not, and these concepts are just concepts,
Yeah.
and that there is this connectedness. So it feels to me like until there is a critical mass that recognize that, everything else is just sort of shuffling deck chairs on the Titanic a bit. And I think that even when we talk about malign forces and we've been led to believe and all that stuff, which like I agree, but even that there's a slight othering in, and so
Yeah.
I mean I don't think that that's avoidable, because obviously the way some people are behaving, it's almost impossible not to say that's wrong. But I think that it's down to a misunderstanding fundamentally. That's my view, not anything malicious. I think if people at the deepest level,
Yeah.
I think there's malicious intent, but at the deepest level, it's a misunderstanding. And I think if we were able to recognize the truth of our true nature and our connectedness with each other and the planet, we're not separate. It's kind of one thing expressing itself in lots of ways. If we were really able to see that, then I think things could change fairly fast. But it feels like we're a long way from seeing that. But things are also moving fairly fast. There's a lot more understanding of this kind of thing. I would never have anticipated me talking like this 15 years ago. So
Yeah.
that's
Well, I think that the reason it looks the way that it does is because you've got a minority that are controlling the image, the conversation out there, the concepts. And I absolutely agree with you. I think the access is for us to actually get to that deeper place rather than shifting one concept for another concept. We've tried that for thousands of years, and that ultimately just leads to more suffering because it's just mind. You're just the mind, and it doesn't matter what the mind does truthfully. This
mhm.
image, that image, unless you get to that deeper place of that bedrock, so to speak, then basically it's just, I was going to say, mental Bayesian. Yeah, so it's just that mind, and I don't know really. I don't know how close we are to the tipping point because the small minority is very loud, but I do
Yeah.
feel like more and more people are having this conversation, and more people are coming to this realization. And I think it's really, courageous of you to really take this on and champion it, because that's what it's going to take, is people like you out there really championing this message and having people be like, oh wait, I'm not my thoughts. I mean, it really it that, but he's got it out there reinforcing it for people.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
So
thank you. And I agree with you. I think, yeah, you kind of, if, yeah, I think you're kind of duty bound to, that's how I feel anyway, somewhat duty bound to speak about this stuff, even though I know some people will be like, you're an idiot, or what are you talking about?
yes,
Um,
yes,
then that's okay.
yeah.
And that's inevitable. But yeah, I feel like, if you can do something that you, and I sincerely believe, so this is in the realm of belief, but I sincerely believe talking about this kind of stuff is helpful and is
Mm.
of service to the whole, then that's the only important thing. That to me is the most important thing, is like, what can you do to shift the needle forward for the whole? And I don't just mean humanity, I mean for the whole. And I don't also want to sound grandiose with that, because I realize how small I am in the big scheme of things. But that to me feels like an important thing to do if you feel drawn to do that.
Well, I think that it's, when people take the time to get to that place of silence, it becomes very clear what there is for them to do if they listen to it. Like,
Mm.
I feel like this is, in that silence, this is what there is for you to do. And when people are following that, you can feel it.
Yeah.
Like, we're
Yeah.
on the track. There's no, like, when I'm talking to people inside the PR world, a lot of it is ego driven, right? They want to be here, 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 here. But with people like you, where you're just listening to, that silence, yeah, it's lovely. And yeah, it's amazing. And it's an
Thank
honor.
you, Drew. Thank
Like,
you, Drew. No, I appreciate that. That's very
yeah,
kind of you. And I applaud the work that you're doing. I think you do stand out uh, in the PR world. I thought the way you try and frame what you do, I do think is important. And I'm even just having on your website that documentary you mentioned of what's his name,
Edward Bernays. Yeah,
Edward Bernays, and to see how this kind of propaganda,
yeah.
the use of propaganda, has developed over the last 100 whatever years. Really interesting. So yeah, I tip my hat to you too, Drew.
Oh, thank you, Simon. I appreciate you taking the time with me and
Pleasure.
thinking. How and where can people find you?
So my website's simonmundie.com, Mundie. I've got my podcast currently called The Life Lessons Podcast. I might change that soon. I've got my YouTube channel. I am Simon Mundie. My book is uh, soon to be available in the United States, but it's you can get it on my website on Amazon, all good bookstores. It's called Champion Thinking: How to Find Success Without Losing Yourself. I very much just use sport as a metaphor to explore these deeper
Yeah,
ideas and stuff like that. And I think that's about it. And then obviously I do speaking and hosting and all that kind of thing. And I've just noticed I've got one of my books here, so I'm just going to flash
yeah,
it up. There it
yeah.
is.
Brilliant.
Jazzy title: How
Yeah,
to Find Success Without Losing Yourself. And yourself in this context is that background sense of being, awareness, consciousness, enoughness that is a nature, and we got to get back in touch with it en masse. Stop messing ourselves up and the planet in together.
brilliant. Perfect place to end. Thank you.
Pleasure.